Okay, well, welcome everybody to this session, the last session for today at the India Media Leaders Summit, and I hope that you enjoyed the session just now, the panel on focusing on gender diversity. My name is Corinne Podger, and if you joined yesterday's session with Dimitri Shishkin, you'll know that I'm a consultant and trainer based in Australia. I've worked with WAN-IFRA many times in the past, and I want to extend my greetings to those of you who I've met in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Cochin. So one of the things that interests me is how our industry is finally getting its head around strategic audience engagement, not just giving our communities information, but reflecting and interacting with them. And that means diversifying our newsrooms. It also means widening the range of people that our journalists choose to interview so that we truly become a mirror of the world. So becoming inclusive of women, of people from diverse ethnic, linguistic and religious backgrounds, and people living with learning and physical disabilities. So our next speaker has truly led the world in making the media the mirror of the world. Nina Goswami is the driving force behind the BBC's 50-50 project, which has significantly increased women's representation in content. And this project has inspired similar efforts elsewhere, including here in Australia where I live, and I have great pleasure in introducing her to tell you what they've been doing and also what's coming up. So over to you, Nina.
Oh, Corinne, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to being in conversation with you after I've done a little bit more kind of explanation about what we do at 50-50. And thank you for being so gracious. But when we talk about 50-50, it is about us all together, working together. And I'm just going to spend the next kind of 10 minutes going through this presentation to talk to you about kind of exactly where we're kind of heading with 50-50. And as always, my slides have disappeared all of a sudden, so bear with me. But as I begin with that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about where 50-50 started. We started back in 2017, and it started with one presenter, Ros Atkins, and he runs Outside Source. He's the presenter of Outside Source, which is a television program which goes out on BBC World TV, and also goes out domestically in the UK as well. And he was listening, this was Christmas 2016, he was listening to a said radio station on the BBC, and for a couple of hours he didn't hear a single female voice, and he thought to himself, how can that be in this day and age? How can we be in 2016 not hearing women's voices on our content, especially because at the BBC we talk about being in this constant state of trying to increase women's representation. And so, he did, as you do, spend his Christmas thinking about how can we solve this problem? What can we do to make change and make difference? And when he came back to us in the newsroom after that in 2017, he essentially came up with a principle, which three core principles that we use today. I can't share my screen, so I'm just going to.
Do you want to give it one more try? I'm sure that we're all happy to. It's funny thing as a broadcaster, you just sort of have a fiddle around and see if you can make it work. As a broadcaster, we're all very uncomfortable with dead air. Do you want to give it a go?
I can share my entire screen and see if this will work. Will this work? Can you see that? Can you see?
Yes, it's worked perfectly.
Right, there we go. Okay, great.
Brilliant.
So as I was saying, we came up with three core principles, and that is these. He came up with, we collect data to affect change. And this is really at the heart of what 50-50 is about, because one of the things that we talked about, he talked about very early on, is this idea that, we don't understand our content. We need to understand it if we're going to create change. And that's what the data is about. And we collect our data to create change in almost real time. So we're looking at our content every day. So if you're TV, a daily program like Outside Source, you'll count the number of men and number of women to see if you can reach 50% women over a month's period. That is the kind of core principle to it. We're sharing that data every day. Then we're looking over that month. So you're 2 weeks in, and you see that actually over 2 weeks, you're at 70% women, 30% men. How do you bring that balance? How do you bring it back to 50-50? What is it that you can think about editorially? Are there particular areas in your storytelling that are over-indexing in one particular direction or not? By understanding that, you can identify the gap and then you can create that change. We also measure what you control, and that's the core principle number 2. And the idea of this at the end of the day is that you can't change what you can't control. And I'm going to delve into that a little bit more deeply. The golden rule, number 3, never compromise on quality. This is the most important thing. I say this about all 3 core principles, but it's the golden rule, is that we will never put anyone on who isn't the best contributor for the particular content we're making. 50-50 isn't about a quota system. It's not about reaching 50% women for reaching women's 50% women's sake. It's about finding the best voices that are available. And so by looking and searching out for brilliant women's voices, we're finding excellent male voices as well. We're finding these new experts and contributors that perhaps we would never have come across before. And that's what's really exciting about 50-50, is just widening that pool of fabulous voices to enrich our storytelling. So I'm going to come back to measure what you control. And you can see on your screen, I'm using a daily TV news example, but you can convert this for radio, and you can convert it for newspapers, for online digital content. But you know, there are lots of different elements that make up a news bulletin or a story or a newspaper. And some of these elements we can control and some of them we can't. So at BBC News, I don't get to decide if I'm editing on the day who my presenters are. That's decided by my bosses way above my head. So we take that out of the count. We also take out what we call the players. So the players are people who are intrinsic to the storytelling of the particular story that we're telling. So I always use the example of the British Prime Minister, currently Boris Johnson. He's doing yet another press conference around COVID. We will be reporting on that for the news, and we will have to include his voice in the piece. So we remove that because we can't control the fact that we need to include him. And we did exactly the same with Theresa May when she was Prime Minister and she was talking about Brexit. But everything else that you see on this screen, interviewers, case studies, the expert commentators, they all count towards our monitoring. And when we count them once. So they could appear twice or 3 times in a program, but we only count them once. And the idea is that we're trying to create a quick, easy monitoring system that fits into our journalists' workflow. And it gives them some real-time data that they can act on as quickly and as soon as possible. So, outside source, back in 2017, when they first did this, for their first month, they were at under 40% women's representation. It took them a few months to get to 50% women's representation, and they've never moved from that since. They've been consistent ever since then. And they showed the way forward for the rest of the BBC. And through word of mouth, we started to expand across news. And now, 4 years on, we are more than 670 teams across the BBC, and not just in news, dramas, music. We even have orchestras that are using those 3 core principles to create change in their content when it comes to increasing women's representation. And so it's really exciting to see what's happening at the BBC, but we're not alone anymore. More than 100 partners in 27 countries, and Corinne mentioned ABC Australia are part of this network, are using 50-50 to increase women's representation. Those 100 partners are not just in the media, but they also encompass other areas as well, including business. So we have the likes of Unilever, PwC, who are looking at actually the spokespeople that they put forward to the media. Are they putting 50-50 representation forward to us? And if they are, then hopefully that will filtrate into the media landscape, which will mean that we are becoming more representative. And we're also working with universities and journalism schools for that next generation coming into our industry. If we can get them to think about diversity and diversity of voice before they come into our industry, hopefully they'll bring that best practice with them. And that's been a really exciting part of the 50/50 project for me personally. I wanted to obviously get into the data with you, and for the first time this year, our Partners Network reported alongside the BBC in what we call the 50/50 challenge. And this is how we did in the month of March for this particular year. And for March, half of the partners who took part, 41 organisations, reached 50% women representation in March, which was brilliant, because you can see it was 31% when those same teams and same organisations first joined 50/50. And what I really like about this kind of replicates what happened at the BBC. In our first challenge year, we were at 57% of our teams reaching 50/50. We're now at year 3, and this is how we've done. 70% of our teams, we're now reaching, here we've got 578 we're reporting. 70% of them reached 50% women representation, up from 36% when they first joined. And the thing that I really like about this graph, and a subsequent graph that I'm about to show you, is actually on the right-hand side, where you see the red, the under 40s. You can see that that is reducing as well in relation to the green. And when we look at that over time, it's a really interesting picture. So over the last 3 years, you'll see on that right-hand side, the red is reducing every year. The longer that you are monitoring your data and you're using it to create change, understanding what your content looks like, the less likely you are to be under 40% women's representation. So that's really exciting. And I'm hoping, you know, in 2 years' time that we'll be starting to see that blue reducing as much as we saw that red disappear from the BBC's content. So that's really, really exciting to see. The other thing that we do in the BBC that we haven't started doing with our partner network yet is looking at a consistency challenge. So looking over time at whether we can create some form of consistency when it comes to representation. And for us, the challenge looks at October to March each year, and we're looking for half of that to be at 45%, and the rest of the time to be reaching 50% women representation. So you can see when we first started, 18% of our teams were doing that. And you can see the difference each year. I love this graph. You can see this consistency increasing as time passes. And also you have to remember that the project is getting bigger. So it becomes more difficult for our teams to be reaching that consistency. So this is why I love this particular chart, because it just shows the difference that's happening across the BBC. And it's something that our audiences are noticing. And every year we do a quick survey of our BBC Online consumers. This includes iPlayer, BBC Sounds, and the BBC News app. This year, 62% of our users noticed that more women were in our content over the last kind of couple of years. And the next two stats are ones that get me excited. 44% of 16 to 34-year-olds say that they actually enjoy our content more as a result of increased women's representation. It's important for us at the BBC because we are looking at that particular audience as an underserved audience. So it's quite exciting to see that they're enjoying that content more. And now, the business case figure that I love to share. 58% of women aged 16 to 34 are consuming more content online for BBC services as a result of increased female representation. And this to me is really important, because if people don't believe necessarily that we do need to diversify voices, then I always think that one place that you can hit them is in the pocket. And if your business is going to benefit from increasing voice, then, you know, this shows that that's possible. The way that I kind of look at it is that, you know, the world's population is 51% made up of women. And if you are not representing them in your content, then you're missing out on half your potential consumer base. And we're seeing through what we've seen in 50/50 and this particular research that there is a real difference that can happen if you are reflecting women in your audiences. So what about the future? We've talked about many of these aspects already. You know, we're very keen to be seeing 50/50's partner network grow. Public broadcasters would be fantastic to see more come and join us in this journey. ABC Australia have been really leading the way on that side of the hemisphere for us, and we have more than 20 public sector broadcasters already taking part. We're seeing journalism schools around the world starting to take part, and this has been really quite exciting, as I mentioned, getting that next generation of editorial leaders to be thinking in a diverse way now will really benefit us in the future. Getting those leading companies on board, because if they are representative, then we will become so as well. One thing that I'm really keen on and that we are seeing and have started in the BBC is about using the success of those 3 core principles that in terms of increasing women's representation, and seeing how that looks when it comes to disability and ethnicity as well, specifically. And back in October, our Director General announced that we are rolling out 50/50 for disability and ethnicity across the BBC. And what that means for us, we love a tagline at the BBC, is 50/20/12. When we're looking at UK content, and this is actually something that reflects what we're doing for our workforce, our staff workforce as well in the UK. What we're looking at doing is 50% women's representation. Obviously, you realise that from what I've been talking about so far. 20% ethnic minority representation, so that is mirroring what's happening in the UK population, and 12% disabled representation. So the idea is that our teams that are monitoring ethnicity and disability, if they are a UK platform, will be aiming for 50/20/12. However, this does change depending on the audience that you are trying to serve. So, for example, BBC London TV, when you're looking at the population of the capital, it is 50% ethnic minority representation. So they won't be aiming for 20%, they will be aiming for 50%, because that will be reflecting their particular audience. And then if we looked at BBC Scotland output, for them, actually 20% would be too high. So 8% is their ethnic minority makeup, and that would be what they're aiming for. And we do exactly the same thing for disability as well. Depending on your particular audience, we are tailoring and flexing the targets so that you are representing your audiences better. So what's the impact been so far? Well, I mentioned that it was October that our Director General announced the rollout. So we've had 220 teams so far join. And of those who had started monitoring in October to March this year, 51% saw some form of improvement. And when I say some form, that could be even 1 percentage point. And the reason that I'm not talking about targets specifically here is because we want to do the same thing that we did with gender, and that's give our teams time to bed in the workflow and create the culture change that they saw when it came to gender representation. We will hopefully in 12 months' time, in the next impact report, give you a bit more detail around this. But one of the things that's been really interesting, especially around the disability monitoring, is that for our pilot teams that were trying this out before we actually officially launched in October, was that they were finding it even quite difficult to move off 0% representation. And so there is a lot of work that we need to do around disability representation as well as ethnicity, and to be hitting the targets that our teams have been setting for themselves. So this is a really exciting space. We're still learning a lot as we're going along. And that's been the beauty of 50/50 throughout, if you ask me, because we have been learning and adapting and evolving as we all learn together. And that's what's really exciting for me, is that this is a full collaboration. It is about not just us at the BBC learning from each other, but from learning from that network as well, and seeing how together we can make sure that we are reflecting the world better. So I hope that's given you a kind of a full flavour of what we've been up to. Was that too much information at one go?
No, not at all. That was superb, Nina. I have a policy of going to the audience first, because I think that's fair. So Abhijit Tita has asked, now I know the BBC is a public broadcaster, but there may be some knock-on effects around BBC World, for example, which is the commercial division of the BBC, has asked, what difference does it bring in for the BBC regarding audience and revenue? Has there been a revenue element to this?
So from a 50-50 perspective, we haven't looked at the money impact of it. We do work with World Service Languages and World Service, and we have 35 countries, 45 languages across the World Service kind of family that are involved in 50-50. So we are seeing an increase in women's representation. We do have in terms of our funding from a government perspective for World Service, a remit that we have to be ensuring that we are supporting an increase in representation for women globally. So 50-50 feeds into that part of the funding, but I don't know about the commercial side, I have to admit, so sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It is an interesting question. And Niharika Raina asks, what were the initial challenges with the 50-50 project? And that actually speaks to a question I have, which is that initiating a project like this to start with must have run into pushback. And so I'm just kind of interested to see, what was the process of bringing, parts of the BBC or individuals within the BBC on this journey as a community?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely the reason why I think I ended by saying that, we're in this together. This is a collaboration. 50-50 is about us all kind of being inspired and some people call it a movement, which I love. But the idea is that, the people who are involved in 50-50 want to be involved in it, that, they believe in it. And that is how we started. It was word of mouth. It's growing organically. It's not, it wasn't kind of, the bosses told us that we have to do this and it was mandatory. It was grassroots up. It was us as the journalists who wanted to do this. And then as it became more successful, and this is literally, it's all happening word of mouth. We got to about 80 teams, and the then Director General, Tony Hall, it was at that point that he heard about what we were doing in news. And I think we just about at that point started getting some topical programs on board as well. He'd heard about it and he went, right, well, hey, you guys are making this a success. This is brilliant. And then he bought into it. And that's when it just went boom. Everyone was like, oh, right, okay. So if those guys can make a success of it, and actually our Director General's bought into this, this could be something that works for us all. And then you saw this kind of collaboration and us together moving it forward. And that's what it really needs. It needs those kind of people who are the champions to make it work and to create that culture change together.
Nice one. And Naushad has asked, which again speaks to a question I have, how has the project impacted on the quality of the news and product? And I guess related to that, how do you sell content diversity to journalists who are under pressure to find someone to comment really quickly on a story? You mentioned not compromising quality. So how was that achieved?
Yeah, absolutely. So to the first point, I mean, they're both about quality. I mean, that's the reason why 50-50 is not a quota system. It is about finding the best voices. And it is essentially, we use the data, we use 50-50 as a tool, as a mechanism to get journalists to be thinking about the quality of their journalism. So, if they're looking at something and they realize actually, you're indexing in a certain direction, there might be something that you can do that's different. And it gives you the opportunity to review what you're doing on your particular content and go, right, yes, actually, this is the best that it can be. Or actually, no, we could have done it slightly differently. And maybe next time that's something that we should think about. And that's the purpose of it. So we're not trying to, have a quota system, as I say. It's about the quality of the journalism. So that's the first point to think about. And then, yes, absolutely. I am a journalist myself. So, I used to implement 50-50, and I still actually do some monitoring for my old team. I used to be editor. Well, I still edit the TV news bulletins. domestically as and when they need me. But what we do, obviously, if there's a breaking news story, you have to go somewhere, and you do tend to go for the people that you know. That is the nature of our business. So we realizing this quite quickly, we're at the BBC, we set up a contributor database. It's got more than 2,000 contributors on it now, and it's growing every day, fortunately. And so now we have the opportunity of literally searching a topic area and seeing who's coming up, who are the different voices that are out there that perhaps we haven't used before. And what we're seeing is that actually, when these new guests do come on, that they become those new regulars, and we're widening that pool of talent and opportunity as well.
Fantastic. Now, I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. We haven't got any more in the chat. Do feel free, if you've still got time, to jump in. So I wanted to just turn to the new focus of sort of widening the definition of diversity. And what has been the audience reaction? I know one of the BBC presenters who is living with a disability. He's an adorable human called Ellis Palmer, who's a mobile journalist. He's in the mobile journalism community, and he's in a wheelchair. And I was just wanting to get a sense of what the audience reaction has been to seeing a broader range of people on the screens and on radio.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of this is that we are trying to reflect society in our content so that society feels connected to what we're doing. I mean, we do obviously at the BBC have a remit to inform, educate, entertain everyone in the UK, and we can't do that unless we are representing everyone and they feel connected to our content. So that's been the real driving force for everything that we do when it comes to diversity innovation at the BBC. We are in that really early stages when it comes to disability and ethnicity representation, and increasing it. So I'll be able to give you a bit more data. It's all data driven, kind of this time next year. But Ellis is a great example of what we're doing to support what's happening in the BBC. So with disability, we realised, as I mentioned, and recognised very early on, that we do need to support our journalists when it comes to finding disabled experts. And also, how do you accommodate for disability? So that was a real kind of barrier in terms of getting disabled voices on for us. So with the Media Trust, which is a charity in the UK, we partnered and created something called reframing disability training for our journalists, and Ellis is one of the trainers. And what we do is we literally are going to our journalists and saying, like, these are things to make it easier for you to get disabled voices onto your content. And we don't want people to be putting disabled voices on just to talk about disability stories. We want you to be getting disabled voices on to talk about the economy, to talk about health, architecture, whatever it might be. What is their specialist subject? And so it's removing those barriers to help support our content makers in that space.
No, that's phenomenal. He really is such an inspiring person, to just huge capacity. I wanted to ask the obvious question, given that we have about a minute, but we've got a little bit of grace because it's the last session of the day. If newsrooms in India want to get involved, how do they do that?
Oh, brilliant question. Thanks for asking, Corinne.
No worries.
Yeah, so you can go to bbc.com/5050 and find out lots more about 5050 on there. There's a contact page. Drop us an email, or you can obviously get in touch with me directly. I am all over the place. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is just nina.goswami@bbc.co.uk. But we would love to, we haven't had many people get in touch from India, so I would love to have some innovators and organizations that want to lead by example. It would be fantastic to hear from you.
I'm going to be slightly cheeky because I heard you also say universities and J schools. And if there are people who are listening and are from the educator community, from the journalism educator community, how do they get involved? Is it the same process?
It's exactly the same. So if you're a J school, essentially what our students are doing is that they are monitoring their news days, their news weeks. They can use it in their coursework. Still trying to look to reach 50% women. Again, go onto the website. If you have a look at the pitch, that is the university project, and so you have the monitoring part of it, but also they get 2 times a year, the opportunity to pitch to make promotional video for 50/50. So you're getting to go out on a BBC platform. And actually, I had a really nice story from Olivia Oates, who was one of the first producers of the first pitch winning collective. She's just got her first job, and in her interview, the feedback that she got was that it was because part of it was because of the fact that she'd done the work with us at 50/50. So yeah, so hopefully it's giving people opportunity as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Wonderful. Well, we will wrap it up there. So thank you so much to Nina Goswami from the BBC. And if you missed that, it was nina.goswami@bbc.co.uk if you want to learn more about the 50/50 project or get involved. My name is Corinne Podger. And tomorrow, of course, India Media Leaders is reconvening. So you can all head off for the day and come back tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. India Standard Time. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us.